4 or 5 days of court time of a Superior Court judge, all paid for by the taxpayers of Ontario and Canada, to argue about a cat. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Beneath the Law, Gavin Tighe with Stephen Thiele. Stephen, fine day for a cat fight.
Yes, it is. I'm, and you and I are like color coordinated again. This is pretty good.
Yeah, we're color coordinated, and except
do you have your claws up on this one or claws down?
Oh yeah, I was declawed. This is it. We're gonna today's episode is dedicated to the epic tale of Harold, the family unfriendly feline who was the cause of great rancor in family court, occupying many days of trial and many pages of judicial wisdom.
It was the only issue in the case was where should the cat live?
Yeah, it was remarkable. Yeah, it was sad in a way though, because the cat. So there was as was typical in these things. Let's sort of lay the groundwork. Family breakup, issues with a younger child who was, I guess it was a tween at this point, voting with his feet to a certain extent in terms of visitation, custody, parenting, all that good stuff. And there was a fight about, the custody and access issues and the son, visiting the father. And really the cat became a bit of a pawn, I thought, in the larger parental battle over the affection of the child and where the child should, how much time the child should spend with the father. And there was all sorts of kind of dark and sinister notes in this case about the father kind of talking about the son hurting animals. And anyways, it was crazy.
The credibility of the parents was left much to be desired in terms of the evidence that they gave. They seem to have contradicted themselves all over the place, which kind of leads to an interesting finding at the end of the day in terms of, how was the judge supposed to believe either parent as to who owned the cat? I just want to back up a little bit, Gavin, because, we're going to talk about this case, and it's weird in a way, but, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, animals have rights.
And, it wasn't about the rights of the animal, though.
Animals are personal property, but people are very concerned about their pets in a family or a marital breakup or breakdown of a family. And that's why this issue comes to court. Except, we had one of our colleagues send this around and said, the court is spending a lot of time determining where a cat is supposed to live and who owns a cat. But this is sometimes what happens in family law disputes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I mean, I think in fairness, I mean, I'm an animal lover for sure. Dog, I love my dog. I mean, one of our associates we sent around the case was back. Well, I'd be in court fighting about my dog. I mean, but people get very, very attached to their pets, obviously.
Absolutely.
But this case was not. I mean, I didn't think the case was about the pet. I thought the case was. I don't think. I mean, there was evidence here about when the family breakup kind of really happened, and they were arguing about who could get stuck with looking after the cat and Harold. We'll call him Harold. And there was some suggestion of, this is awful, but I mean, there's some suggestion that the wife said, well, when I left, it was under, there was threats of violence, or there was some sort of issue, and I had to go to a shelter, and they wouldn't take any pets, so I had to leave the cat with the husband, and the cat ended up with the husband, but it was only because of that situation. And then, when the wife found her own place and everything, she wanted the cat back, but the husband said, I don't want your cat. Or there was all sorts of issues about, the cat was kind of getting punted around like the proverbial football. And then it was the child of the marriage. Apparently, the child was quite attached to the cat, and wanted to go visit the father primarily to go see the cat. I mean, it was kind of talk about a dysfunctional family relationship, that the child was more interested in spending time with the cat than he was with his father.
Well, and then the child tried to sneak the cat out at one of the visitations, which led to some form of, I don't know, altercation, apparently, that involved police. Police didn't lay any charges.
More violence.
Right. And then the father basically saying, okay, you want to visit with me, but we're going to visit not where the cat lives. We're going to visit where the father's mother lived. And so the child was deprived of seeing the cat. So
yeah, the cat was, it was catnip to get the son over. And again, all part of this, this horrible tug of war, family law dispute. And I mean, ultimately, they resolved all of the other issues and support, usual stuff. I think custody and access, at least they agreed to it. And the only thing left that they were fighting about was who owned the cat.
Yeah.
And again, I think the cat really was, it wasn't like, I think it was the judge went into a long history of this cat. It wasn't like, as you pointed out, cats and dogs and pets generally, and animals are property. And as far as the law is concerned, they can be bought and they can be sold. I mean, there are pet stores. You can go to the store and buy a dog. So they're just like you can go to the store and buy a pair of shoes. So that, you could trace, I suppose, the title to the pet by going back to the pet store. But this cat, Harold, was different, because Harold had actually been a barn cat, which was remarkable in itself. And part of a litter that was born on, I think it was the mother's father's farm. And the barn cat, Harold had ingratiated himself as a kitten into the family, but he was not a purchased commodity. He was a natural born barn cat. So they had to go through whose cat was it?
What's unclear to me is whether the barn cat was owned previously by somebody, or whether it was a feral cat that was just living in the barn.
As much, I confess I don't know a lot about barn cats, but I have a funny feeling they're not owned by anybody. I have a funny feeling with barn cats, they do the owning.
I know that when I walk around Hawaii, there are a lot of feral cats walking around.
For sure, or anywhere
with the free range chickens. But
it's funny, I've digressed, but like went to Ernest Hemingway's house in Florida. It's overrun with these cats. Like, it's absolutely, right. He just had they just took over. So and if you ask them, if you ask those cats who their owner was, I think they would give you a swift answer. They aren't owned by anybody.
But you know what, Gavin? It's important context that that is being raised in terms of it was a barn cat. So this was a farm property in Ontario, right, that was the mother's of her family had owned this farm, I think, for 3 or 4 generations.
Right.
And so she was the one who was always caring for the other farm animals, the pig or goats, whatever, lived on this farm.
It's probably not that complicated. I mean, you think about it in terms of if this, we're really getting off. I'm speculating here, but I'm assuming that if a cow is born on a ranch, that it's the property of the ranch. I mean, it's livestock, born on a property. Chickens are hatched on a chicken farm. They're property of the chicken farm. I don't think there would be much dispute to that. But of course, the mother didn't own the farm. Her family did. So it raises another issue: is whose cat was it? I don't know if it's as clear as that, because the cat was, of course, taken away from the farm and was living with the husband.
Right. Well, the mother's father owned the farm and then sold it to to the mother and her ex-husband or separated husband.
Right.
So
okay, that's right.
Right. So it was not clear whether there's
So it was, but the cat
joint
lived
ownership
with the
in the
father.
animal that lived on the farm property.
But the cat was in the custody of and possession and owned and living with the husband, father. Right?
Harold the cat, correct.
Right. Harold, that's where Harold was hanging out.
After the separation, that's where the cat was hanging out.
Right. Well, for the reasons the mother suggested, was she was unable to take Harold with her. Whatever. But at the end of the piece, the court decided that it was indeed the mother's cat. That brief possessory relinquishment at the separation really didn't amount to a change of title.
Let's talk about that, because everybody claimed ownership in the cat.
Right.
The 14-year-old boy claimed ownership in the cat. The mother claimed ownership in the cat. And then the father claimed basically either a joint ownership or an abandonment of the cat, and therefore he took ownership of it after the separation because the cat lived with him. And so the 14-year-old boy, the judge goes through this. As you said, the cat was born on the property. Wasn't bought from the store, so there's no ownership papers. The cat wasn't a Christmas gift to a child, as kids always, can I have a dog or can I have a cat for Christmas? And parents oblige their children, and so there would be gift of a animal, but there wasn't any of that, and the child wasn't paying for any of the expenses, wasn't paying for the vet bills, wasn't buying the food.
Wow.
May have taken care of the cat litter box on occasion, but that wasn't enough to give the kid ownership. Right? And And so with respect to the father, the question was whether the mother who was claiming ownership had abandoned the cat.
Correct.
And so the interesting facts are this cat was actually stillborn in the litter, and the facts are that the mother gave the cat CPR to keep it alive when it was a kitten. And so that's a factor. It's a factor that goes to she was the one who was tending and caring for the cat from birth. And that's what convinces the court to basically say she was the owner of the cat.
Yeah, I come back to the point. I mean, it's a very interesting
fact.
issue. It's a very interesting issue, of course. But I mean, I do think there's a larger concern here. I mean, we can get into this really on the issue of the ownership of this animal, which was, as I said, intertwined with this whole drama of the family dynamic. But at the end of the day, I mean, what I scratch my head about, and what I have trouble
like a cat.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll try to keep the scratching the analogies to a minimum. But this is 4 or 5 days of court time of a Superior Court judge, all paid for by the taxpayers of Ontario and Canada, to argue about, a cat. I mean, I really it troubles me to no end when I read about, and we don't practice in the criminal law area, but I read about cases where people are being released because they can't get the trial in time, and they, complaints about lack of judicial resources, and I think those are all valid. I think that there are significant lack of judicial resources, but at the same time, with the scarcity of judicial resources, it really cries out, to my mind, for some, common sense in terms of the, ways to economize the use of a scarce resource. And it isn't on arguing for 5 days about a cat. Sorry. I mean, I know you love your cat, but if you want to fight about the cat, my own personal opinion, fine. The court should have a release valve where they can direct cases like this to arbitration. And you can go off and you can arbitrate, pay for your arbitrator, pay for your courtroom till the cats come home. But not the taxpayers of Canada and judges should not be spending their time on this. This is not the type of a dispute that has any public importance that justifies that use of public money and resources being spent on it. And I know that sounds callous for people who really love their cat. But again, if you really love your cat, go pay for your own judge to fight about it.
Yeah, but I think, Gavin, look, our arbitration needs two parties to agree to an arbitration, unless there's a statute that says,
Well, maybe there should be.
Fights over family pets or personal property, family
I
pet.
wouldn't stop at that. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't stop at that. I think that there's a whole series of non-public interest issues, and I deal with lots of them all the time in terms of civil litigation. And I know it's outside of our tradition, but there are some civil litigation cases that have public importance and that have are useful, and it's important for the law to grow. And then there's other, civil litigation cases that are just much ado about nothing. And my own view is that people should be allowed, and people should have recourse to argue about their issues, and people should have a right to have their issues decided. But I don't know if they have a right to have the taxpayers pay for it.
Well, look, it's a tough call. We talked about it right from the outset of this. People treat pets as family members. In some cases, there are couples, they don't have children, they have pets. And the pets are basically treated as, their children or their family members. And when marriages break down or couples break down, they need to have somewhere to go to resolve their disputes. And people get attached. There's emotional attachments to pets. Pets provide emotional support to people at the same time as well.
I'm not discounting the value of any of that.
So where do you go?
No, I'm not discounting the value of any of that. I'm not suggesting
where
that's
do you
not.
go?
But I'm just saying, my point is simply that maybe right now there is no place to go.
Right.
But my point is maybe there should be. And I'm saying, look.
And that's fair.
If a pet, a cat or a dog is property at law, it's property. When we talk about fighting about things that have sentimental value, that's fine. But if it's property, I mean, the most expensive cat or dog is going to be what, $5,000-$10,000 if you're really going out there on the exotic. I mean, is it really what we're talking about, a $5,000 or $10,000 asset? I'm gonna just even bookend it at that. And you're going to spend 5 days of court time with a judge. Do the math on the judge is making, whatever, several $100,000 a year. The court itself, the facilities, the registrar, all of the court staff that are involved in that. Then there's lawyers both sides are paying 2 lawyers to argue about this. You've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of resources being used to fight about $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, at some point, you have to say to yourself, I get it that this cat is important to these people. And if it's not important to them, sure, they should be able to fight about it, but they should have to pay for it. They should have to pay an arbitrator and fund it. And it's not fair, in my view, to the taxpayers of Ontario or Canada that they should be funding it. But that, maybe I sound like, I don't mean to sound like the Grinch. I'm not suggesting that these aren't emotional issues, and I'm not trying to minimize them. I'm just saying that it's not really something that I think the public purse should be funding. Just like there are medical procedures that are elective. If somebody, really hates the way their eyebrows look or something, if they want to fix it, they want to go ahead. But I mean, no one would say that OHIP should pay for it. There are lots of procedures and lots of medical procedures that people are free to go off and pay for on their own. And I think that law really needs to take a hard look and have elective lawsuits, which these are. And if you want to do elective lawsuits, just like elective surgeries, you got to fund them.
Well, look, I think what's interesting in this dispute is that the litigants, the father and the mother, were able to resolve everything else but the cat. And like they were able to deal with their child in terms of custody and parenting time. It's logical to me that they should have been able to deal with the cat in a
Yeah,
reasonable
maybe
manner.
if they had to pay to pay for an arbitrator rather than get a free. I mean, and and I also say this. I mean, courts should not be the arena for venting spleen. I mean, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be there. People shouldn't be litigating just because they're angry with each other and they're using the courts for that. I mean, again, I do think that the courts should have a higher purpose, and the courts should have a what I'll call it a release valve. If a judge sees a matter that has no public importance, that is purely is not of nominal value and purely only of interest to the parties, the judge should be able to say, I intend to refer this matter to binding arbitration, barring some argument that I shouldn't. And that doesn't exist as far as I know in our rules now, but perhaps it's something that should.
Well, it's an interesting reform that should be considered by our governments because you know this better than I do. Dealing with litigation matters in the court system now is taking forever.
Yeah, because
you can't get trial dates now till what?
No.
2027, 2028 in
right.
Toronto?
And here's 5 days it was taken up over Herald. I mean, that that's, to me, that this case should never been in a public court. This case should have been either settled, or if they want to arbitrate about it, they should go off and arbitrate. They could still till the cats come home, as I say. So let them do that, but that on their own dime, not on the public purse.
Well, and perhaps maybe there's some other creative ways to deal with this. One of the things that I was fascinated reading in this case, and I knew that there were other cases dealing with animals in marital breakdowns. There's actually a pretty good body of law in terms of factors that a court will consider in terms of ownership. But people enter into prenuptial agreements. Maybe right, like maybe they need to have prenuptials with respect to pets, and ownership of a pet that enters into a family. That's certainly a factor that's taken into account. Whether a pet is owned by one of the parties prior to people getting into a relationship. People need to document things as well. People need to document things with respect to pets.
This is purely like
that would make things a lot easier.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's not real. I mean, people love their pets. I love my dog.
I love my fish.
No question about that. I mean, is it logical? Of course, it's not logical. It's emotional. Of course, I get it. But but that the point of the matter is, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be, have those feelings or have that attachment. I'm just saying that I don't think it's one of the things that the public should be forced to subsidize. I think that just like elective surgeries, I mean, people want to do what they want to do. That's up to them. But, there's not everything is covered by OHIP, and not everything should be covered by, the Superior Court.
Yeah, no, well, look, it'll be interesting to see in terms of the costs. From what I read in the judgment, the court was prepared not to award costs to anybody, so they're paying for their own lawyers. It's pretty expensive fight over the animal.
Yeah, I'm talking about something else, though. I'm not talking about
costs.
So from our listeners' perspective, we talk about costs all the time, but costs are the other side's costs. They're what's referred to as party and party costs. So in other words, if I'm a plaintiff and I win, I'm entitled to my costs from the defendant. But there's a whole cost to running the court in the first place. I mean, the lights are on, somebody's there to open the door. There's a court reporter, there's a judge, there's a physical space. None of that's free. None of that is free. And my point of the matter is at some point that, the courts have got to stop being sort of a free resource for what are purely personal disputes that are over, items of nominal monetary value.
I don't know. I can feel the access to justice folks trampling on my head right now.
Well, I'm not. I don't know. I haven't. My release valve would have obviously certain. I mean, these people certainly didn't seem like they were hurting for money. They had lawyers there. They were, they had all of the evidence went in by way of affidavits, all drafted by lawyers, which is not cheap. I mean, actually, it's more expensive for the parties to get their lawyers to draft the affidavits than it is just to go to court and spiel their evidence out and sit down. So I think that in situations where the parties can afford it and they want to have this, they want to argue about it. Nobody says you can't argue about it. It's just where you get to argue about it. And I think that we need to have some serious reform, or else the whole system is going to crumble under its own weight.
I agree with you 100%. There needs to be serious reform within our court system. Unfortunately, we have this case that took up 5 days of court time, battling over a piece of important personal property. I mean, animals are live things. I know that in Quebec they've now said that trees have rights, but
yeah.
But here we are. Like this is what happens, and this is what the courts deal with. But so certainly an interesting kind of case to look at in terms of this battle over the family pet Harold. And I hope Harold now has found a good home, and that the 14-year-old boy is happy, and that we don't see an appeal out of this.
Yeah, and it's good to see our podcast purring along there, Stephen. In any event, we're out of time as usual. So always remember, if no one is above the law, then everyone is beneath it. And special shout out to our producer, Doug Downs. Please give us your comments anywhere you listen to your podcast. Tell us if we're doing okay. Tell us if we're doing terrible. Tell us if you want to hear about specific topics, or if you really liked a topic, if you really hated a topic. Always glad to have any feedback that comes our way, and look forward to speaking again next time.